Hi everyone, it's Sandra again here today, and this is the second installment of the videos I'm making on the True Gospel Revealed Anew by Jesus, which I have introduced in the last video, which I'll put a link to in the description. And today I'll introduce James E. Padgett, who was the writer of these messages, who automatically wrote messages from the spirit world, which were given to him by Jesus and other celestial spirits. Additionally, I'll also read some of the beginnings of the testimony of the editor and publisher of these messages, Dr. Leslie Stone. So this is a portrait of James E. Padgett. Mr. James Edward Padgett was born August 25, 1852 in Washington, D.C., and attended the Polytechnic Academy Institute at Newmarket, Virginia. In 1880, he was admitted to the bar in Washington, D.C., and thereafter he practiced law for 43 years until his death on March 17, 1923. During his student years, he became friendly with Professor Joseph Saliards, an instructor at the Academy, who after his death in 1885 wrote him many interesting messages. His wife, Helen, died about February 1914 and was the first to write him from the spirit world. Padgett never practiced the gift of mediumship as a means of earning money. He was dedicated wholly to the reception of the great messages signed Jesus and his many disciples. Now I will introduce you to Dr. Leslie Stone, who is the actual editor and publisher of the Padgett Messages, or the True Gospel Revealed Anew by Jesus. This testimony is the outgrowth of the many queries that have resulted from the publication of volumes 1 and 2 of the Messages from Jesus and Celestials, which was changed to True Gospel Revealed Anew by Jesus, which I first printed in 1940, and which have thereafter gone through 3 editions. On the publication of this 4th edition of Volume 1, I am integrating all those questions from interested readers into a new testimony, which will show how it was that Mr. Padgett was able to perform the work of receiving these remarkable messages. It tells how I met Mr. Padgett and my reasons for believing that he was actually able to receive messages not merely from the spirit world, but from the greatest spirits of the celestial heavens, whose master is Jesus of Nazareth. I was born on November 10, 1876, at Aldershot, Hampshire, England, the 10th of 13 children. I attended the public school there and later completed courses at the grammar school of Farnham, Surrey, founded by King Edward VI. Thereafter, I worked in the saddlery shop of my father, William Stone, at Aldershot and later at London. When business slackened, I emigrated to Toronto, Canada in 1903. On that occasion, my mother, who was a great believer in prayer, asked the Heavenly Father to let her know what his will was. His answer was that I should go. In Toronto one day, I was attracted to a notice of a spiritualist meeting. Never having attended one before, I was curious and went. The medium, who was giving messages from the platform, pointed to me and said, "Your father, who says he is William Stone, is here and is glad that he is able to greet you." The medium then described my father, such as I had known him. He had never been to the New World and had died when I was 7 years of age. Under the circumstances, this woman could hardly have been asked to give his information without direct contact with the spirit of my father. After this experience, I began to read many books on spiritualism, such as The Nature's Divine Revelation by Andrew Jackson Davis, also The Great Harmonia by the same author. These books had a profound effect upon me, for the faith in the religious doctrines which my mother, a strong Baptist, had taught me could no longer interest me as the repositories of the truths. I believed in the existence of a great spirit world and in the communication of mortals and spirits. At the same time, however, spiritualism as it was being taught did not, I confess, completely satisfy my soul longings. Not until I met Mr. James E. Padgett and read the messages which I am thoroughly convinced came from Jesus and the celestial spirits, was I satisfied that at last I had really come to know the great religious truths and that I knew the way to the Father and at one with Him. It took me 11 years after coming to the New World before I met Mr. Padgett. Spirit guides advised my going to Detroit. Here, the production of automobiles was such that it was impossible to maintain myself in saddlery work. And again, on spiritual advice, I moved to Buffalo. Here I worked and studied in a hospital for 7 years and finally became a graduate nurse. This period of my life was, I feel, an important one, in that it gave me that interest in healing, which later induced me to study chiropractic. In Buffalo, I continued to be interested in spiritualism and received another personal proof of spirit life. At one spiritualist meeting, I was seated next to a woman who happened to be a medium. She suddenly turned to me and said, "Your mother is here with you." I replied, "You must be mistaken, madam. I had a letter from my mother quite recently and she is in good health." The medium shrugged and replied, "Your mother never lived in this country. She tells me she lived in England and died a short time ago." She went on to report what my mother presumably had died of, described the funeral and mentioned the nature of those present. She told me that I had a sister Edith from whom I would receive a letter confirming what she said. The letter arrived just as the woman had predicted and corroborating her statements. If I ever had doubts then as to the truth of spiritual communication, I lost them at that point. As a matter of fact, I advanced in spiritualism to the extent of going into trances, wherein I am convinced I have been able to visit the spirit world. I know I have met my mother there, a sister Kate and a brother Willie, who had passed on in 1908. I knew I was in my spirit body and had left my mortal frame, and indeed, I had no desire to return to it, but my mother and sister insisted that I had a spiritual work to accomplish in the earth plane, and that I could not come permanently into the spirit world until I had accomplished that task. I could go on to relate many interesting and curious experiences which I was privileged to have in the spirit world, but this is not the occasion for it, and I shall proceed with the narrative. During my work in the hospital, I had become interested in chiropractic, and on the suggestions of spirits who communicated messages to me through mediums, at Lilydale, New York, I studied at the Palmer Gregory College of Chiropractic in Oklahoma City, and graduated in 1912 after a 2-year course. Shortly thereafter, I became a licensed practitioner in Washington, D.C. There comes to my mind the name of a Mrs. Bartholomew, a trumpet medium, and a Mr. Pierre Keeler, a slate-writing medium, whom I consulted while at Lilydale. It was through this gentleman's brother that I was able to obtain a spirit photograph of my soulmate, Mary Kennedy. I shall refer to this in more detail later. On graduating, I went to Philadelphia with a view to opening an office, but on receiving messages from many of my relatives in the spirit world through a medium named Mrs. Bledsoe, I opened an office instead on the boardwalk of Atlantic City. I must say that I was successful and was instrumental in restoring many patients to health. I remember distinctly a newsboy of about 9 years of age whose name was George Hutton. He suffered from paralysis in the legs due to polio and used crutches to swing his legs. I offered to give this boy treatment without charge, to which his mother consented. The boy was able to walk again without use of his crutches in 2 treatments, and an osteopath and MD Dr. Walton came to see me about it. "I saw the newsboy today walking without his crutches," he said, "and he told me you had treated him. I came to find out if it is so." Later, George came in and confirmed the healing. I have always felt that this instance of healing, as well as many others that I cannot mention here, was due to spiritual forces operating through me. Although I was kept busy at my boardwalk practice during the summer months, autumn found business so slack due to the closing of many hotels and departure of people that I was compelled to find another location. Again, I went to Philadelphia and consulted Mrs. Bledsoe, who, through her spirit contacts, advised me to go to Washington, D.C. I arrived there in November 1912 and opened an office on 14th Street, Northwest. Here I fortuitously met a gentleman with whom I had become acquainted at Lilydale. His name was William Plummer, of Frederick, Maryland. He visited me at my office and told me he was interested in procuring a copy of Was Abraham Lincoln a Spiritualist? By Nettie Maynard Colburn. He wanted to find the owner of the copyright, for he wished to have the book reprinted. In his search, he had found the name of a Mr. Rollison Colburn of Tacoma Park, but was informed that the letter was not related to the writer. The search, however, had not been entirely futile, for the Rollison Colburns proved to be interested in spiritualism, and a common interest between them developed into a close friendship. I became acquainted with the Colburns through Mr. Plummer. I found them very kind and lovable people who were greatly interested in psychic experiences. It was through their son, Arthur Colburn, that I first heard of the messages that were being received by Mr. Padgett. I was introduced to him at his office in the Stewart Building, 6th and D Street, Northwest, where he was practicing law. This was in the early fall of 1914, when everyone was excited about the great conflict that had broken out in Europe. Some people felt the period ushering in the end of the world had come, and that Jesus himself would appear at this end time. For me, it was the end of my travel and spiritual search. So this was the first installment of Dr. Stone's testimony, and it's more related to him and his life and how he came to meet James Padgett. The next installment will be more related to the relationship between Dr. Stone and James Padgett and how James actually felt about receiving these messages, his struggle to believe that they came from celestial spirits, and in fact even that they came from his wife initially. So that is going to be in the next video, the actual continuation of Dr. Stone's testimony related to the True Gospel Revealed Anew by Jesus. So you'll be hearing from me again soon. Bye for now.